Hey everyone, in today's session we're going to talk about risk rules. Risk rules are the limitations that we set on a merchant processing, either on the merchant level or on the mid-level, and what's allowed in terms of transaction count and transaction volume. To configure that, we'll go to Accounts, Merchants, and choose a specific merchant to set his own risk rules. After we're done with that configuration, we will show you how to set the risk rules on the mid-level. So let's choose HaCommerce. We've pre-configured HaCommerce with several risk rules, some on past transactions and some on declines. We can go to the Risk tab, which will load the pre-configured risk rules. There are two types of risk rules to be configured, either on an email configuration or on a card. The difference is when you're using alternative payment methods such as Software, Skrill, NetTellers, and other, you won't have a card number to rely on to set the risk rules. And for that reason, we have risk rules configured on emails. And we can see here from the UI, we have both past transactions and issuer declines in that case. To go over more, let's click Add and review the different configuration options. Firstly, we'll have to configure either this rule will be set on a credit card level or on an email level. So let's, for the sake of the example, stick with credit cards. We have 4 types of declines and 1 type of past transaction. The different types of declines come from the reply code. When you set the reply codes in our system, you can differentiate between a reply code which relates to an issuer decline, meaning we've passed the system all the way after risk rules checks and limits and technical errors, and went to the acquirer and from the acquirer to the issuer, and then we got the final decline. We can also set risk decline, meaning declines that arrived from one of these rules in the system and as a result decline the transaction. Gateway decline are usually associated with technical errors as part of the transaction, missing parameters and such, and all types of decline that will actually accumulate all the different types together and will calculate for the decline reasons. Past transaction, regardless to say, these are the approved transaction processed by the system when we want to limit the card holder and specifically on how much money he can process in a certain period of time. So that's what the example, set it on past. Credit type, you can choose if we're limiting refunds, regular transactions, and more. So let's choose regular. Let's set the limit on a daily limit. How much do we allow them to process successfully in one day? We can limit by the different payment methods, or in this case, set it to all. Now, the different limits, as we talked in previous sessions about the whitelist, you can set different ranges of limits to different levels of whitelist, meaning a customer that is set to bronze whitelist will be able to do 5 transactions a day, no more than $500. A customer set to silver can do 7 transactions for 700 euros, and then so on and so forth. If we don't list anything on the whitelist, this means that a regular Joe coming from the streets, no association with any whitelist level, will be processing and will be set to these limits. So let's define that for USD. We'll have an amount of $1,000 a day, but no more than 5 transactions. So if, for example, I've processed 2 transactions, $600 worth each, the second transaction will get declined for going over the limit because 2 transactions at $600 will give us $1,200 of processing. The other way around, if we're processing 6 transactions and each one of them is $100 worth, meaning the total amount will be $600, but still the 6th transaction will get declined for crossing over the amount of transaction allowed per day. The same can be configured the other way around on declines, meaning I do not allow, in this case, no amount, but I won't allow more than 3 declines a day. Why is that? In that case, the customer is attempting again and again to process a transaction that the likelihood for that to be approved is low. And then in that case, we can decide if we're just blocking the transaction, declining the transaction, or blocking the user for a certain amount of hours. So let's say I'll close him, I'll block him down for 3 hours for that. So this will put him in blacklist for 3 hours, and after that we'll release it. The difference you'll see will be in the reply codes. So if the reply codes for a limit of crossing the limit of 3 transaction count will be 585. In case we block the card for blacklist, the reply code you'll get will be 562, which will be a blacklist decline. In this case, of course, before you click save, you have to set if it's active and if it's active in virtual terminal. Why is the difference? In some cases, we allow the merchants to apply judgment if they have managers within the operations. And then when only the manager can use the virtual terminal, they can have a certain set of risk rules, let's say, higher than that because of management's involvement in the transaction. But in our case, let's save both of them. And then we just now configure the risk rule for credit cards for declines for no more than 3 declines in a period of 1 day. Now, in this case, we talked about the merchant level, meaning every processing crossing over from the merchant will go to the mid and then will be processed successfully. But when you're operating a PSP, you might be using the same mid for multiple merchants and you'll have limits set with your provider. So to set that, we'll go to accounts, debit companies, and mid configuration. Under the mid configuration, we'll be able to set what are the limits for this mid. So let's say for the example, let's take Paystack. And under Paystack, we'll have a risk tab that will allow us to add the same configuration for a limit, but on a bank level. So no more than X amount of transactions. So let's say period of 1 day, 3 transactions, and it's active and active. So scenario, a cardholder came to the merchant, only did 1 transaction, but the same cardholder arrived in another merchant on your platform, but then he did 3 more transactions there. When he crossed over the limit of the 3 transactions allowed per day, he won't be declined on a merchant level, he will be declined on a mid level. Thank you very much for sticking for the video about risk rules on both merchant level and mid level. Please do check out our channel, like and subscribe to different videos, and see you next time in another video about the system. Thank you.